Welcome to this explainer. You know, we humans are, by our very nature, creatures of the daylight. We literally confirm the reality of our world by sight. We trust what we can see, and we use the light to anchor ourselves to the truth of our surroundings. But what happens when that light is taken away? Well, something profound shifts within our psychology. Today, we're exploring a fascinating intersection of folklore, psychology, and human nature, the Bloody Mary phenomenon. We're going to deconstruct exactly what happens when we deliberately step into the shadows. It presents a truly captivating paradox, doesn't it? Why do humans invent games that require the dark? As daytime creatures, darkness has never merely been the absence of light for us. It represents the great unknown. And yet, across generations, across entirely different cultures, we've actively invented games and rituals where we turn the lights off on purpose. We willingly, almost eagerly, construct scenarios where we stare into a mirror in pitch blackness, basically just to scare ourselves. Why on earth would a species so completely reliant on vision willingly sever its greatest connection to reality? To really understand this, we have to look back at our primal history. There's this quote that beautifully captures it. When the sun goes down, the outline of reality softens. Think about our earliest ancestors for a second. Fire was the ultimate technology. It's what kept us safe from whatever moved out there in the dark. But fire always carries the threat of going out. And in the dark, the unseen remains. The sudden cry of an animal, the inexplicable rustle of tall grass. It is absolutely no wonder that we carry this deeply ingrained evolutionary fear of the dark. Our ancestors survived simply because they respected what hid in those softened outlines of reality.
Section 1. The Architecture of the Ritual.
Okay, let's dive into this. That primal fear we just talked about perfectly sets the stage for one of the most famous childhood legends in America, the story of Bloody Mary. The ritual itself is remarkably simple. You go into a room, you kill the lights, stare into a mirror, and chant her name 3 times. But think about it. Why is this almost universally performed in a bathroom? Well, the architecture of this space is actually essential to the psychology of the experience. It satisfies 2 physical conditions perfectly. First, it can be easily sealed into complete, suffocating darkness. And second, it always contains a mirror. When you close that door and flip that switch, the place where you normally just brush your teeth completely ceases to be a bathroom. It becomes a sealed chamber, a literal border between here and somewhere else.
Section 2. Your brain in the dark. Now, what's really interesting here is when we strip away the supernatural, when we look at the crisp intellectual reality of what is actually happening in your brain, it's arguably even more fascinating than a ghost story. Consider the psychological cascade happening to you. First, your visual information is cut off almost entirely by the darkness. Second, despite having absolutely nothing to focus on, you force your eyes to stare at one fixed object, the mirror. When you do this, your ordinary visual perception naturally begins to waver. The brain, desperately seeking data to process, just finds a void. Denied anything real to see, illusions can and do follow. The brain actually begins to spin the fears and fragments buried deep in your subconscious into a tangible image right before your eyes. Just think about the weight of that for a moment. Staring into the dark mirror is the act of looking inward, spinning your own buried fears and fragments into an image before your eyes, rather than looking outward. You think you're looking for a monster in the glass, right? But to stare into a mirror in the dark is not to look outward at all. Because your brain is completely starved of light and visual input, it has no choice but to reach inside. It takes your own hidden anxieties, your own repressed fragments of thought, and projects them onto the glass. You aren't looking at a ghost. You are quite literally looking into your own depths. Section 3. Inverting the holy. So if the brain is just projecting its own fears, why do we project this specific image? Who exactly is this blood-soaked woman slowly materializing in the glass? Accounts of her identity vary wildly depending on who you ask, but one striking American variation of the tale holds that the figure is actually the Virgin Mary herself. In a really dark twist, some say this blood-soaked Mary is holding the murdered infant Christ. Now, it's absolutely crucial to state that there is nothing in Scripture that says so. This is pure folklore. The Virgin Mary holding the murdered infant Christ is a story passed down in whispers among children on playgrounds and at sleepovers. But the fact that it is a children's invention is exactly the point, and it reveals a whole lot about what truly terrifies us.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core literary mechanism of dread. On one side, you have the Virgin Mary, the supreme symbol of holiness, purity, and motherhood. But then she is entirely inverted into an image of blood, death, and defilement. That reversal, taking something profoundly sacred and violently corrupting it, is exactly what makes the darkness feel so unclean. We aren't just afraid of a monster here. We are terrified by the subversion of safety and holiness.
Over the decades, the specific details of the legend have morphed. For some, she's a witch. For others, a victim of a terrible crime. And for others still, this corrupted religious figure we just discussed. The name Bloody Mary survives the test of time, but what actually fills that name changes with whoever tells the tale. The lore basically acts as a malleable container for whatever societal or personal dread is most relevant to the person standing in the dark. That core psychological dread keeps the ritual alive, even as the narrative adapts. So the absolutely crucial point to take away is this. The mirror is empty. The darkness is just an absence of light. The bathroom is just a room. The true architecture of the ritual is built entirely within your own mind. When you kill the lights and stare into that void, your brain scrambles to make sense of the softened outlines of reality. It reaches into your deepest fears and projects them right back at you. Ultimately, what will you see on your side of the glass? Well, whatever you see in that mirror in the dark is decided entirely on this side of the glass. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I have a feeling that tonight you might just think twice before turning off the bathroom light.